You're the guys who did the Twin Towers in New York. Yeah, you're our pals. We want to go with you, right? So that's how these things work. But fundamentally, Syrian society and Syrian culture is not inclined whatsoever. It's not disposed to even a Muslim Brotherhood kind of politics. So I don't think if you whacked Assad and really hammered the Baathists, that the consequence would be any kind of an al-Qaeda regime. If we were conducting ourselves in ways that the United Nations claims to stand for, we would rid that country of Assad and the Alawi ruling class and the Ba'athist phenomenon. And we would whack the living hell out of Al-Qaeda more or less at the same time. And we would support the opposition, the National Coalition for the Opposition, which is already recognized by something like 54 countries as the legitimate government of Syria. But we've been telling ourselves for far too long, flattering ourselves, our cowardice, excusing our cowardice by resort to this business about us being war-weary. Well, you know what? People who talk like that were war-weary on the afternoon of September 11th, 2001. That's the first thing. The second thing is Afghanistan and Iraq, to the American budget, over the whole period from 2003 to 2012 was never more than 4% of federal spending. So give me a break. Give me a break. But, under this administration, I don't think anything useful is going to happen. And when you look at the Republicans in the United States, these gargoyles, like Ron Paul, or Rand Paul, and all these other... I hate to be depressing about this, because I'm usually
it's okay.
Chin up.
We're the depressing film. That's our job.
But I just, in the foreseeable future, I see no leadership coming from the West. But one little glimmer of hope is this, and that is, as we saw in Tunisia, as we saw in Egypt, you never really know the lash that will cause the slave to turn on his master. You don't know when it's going to happen, what hour of the night. There comes a point sometimes when people just say, I've fucking well had it. And they rise up, and they rise up en masse, and they begin to develop a momentum. And so, hey, let's keep a good thought. Sorry, carry on.
No worries. I have a question. What do you suppose the will of the people is for, or what you suppose the potential is for the country separating?
You mean fracturing?
Fracturing,
Oh,
yeah.
I think it's done. It's a done deal.
But I mean into legitimate countries, separate countries.
Whooshed. I don't know that an Al-Qaeda emirate would be considered legitimate by many people, but maybe some kind of a Alawite-istan or whatever towards the coast, right? And maybe a kind of a free Syria, in the corridor from Aleppo sweeping down towards Daraa. Sure. And Kurdistan, and some sort of independent Kurdistan. Yeah, I can see that.
When you spoke to
Maybe
people,
that's
was there any talk of that? Did people imagine their own
People don't
homeland?
like talking about that. People don't like talking about that because it's sort of like giving up, right? But people do talk about that. You know what? People used to talk about this in Afghanistan. When they get really glum and weary, they'd say, well, let the Pashtuns have Pashtunistan. And that was always really sad because then it's always, fine Pashtuns that you don't want to surrender to the mercies of the Taliban and what have you. But, people talk about it now. I mean, people, I think, recognize that the country isn't there anymore. It's never going to come back. Not in the way it was.
Yes, I'd like to ask just a quick question about the role of Turkey in all of this, and in particular the Islamist Prime Minister and the Islamist President, and their encouragement of jihadists who fly from Tunisia and other countries and are given a very warm welcome in Turkey, and they expedite their departure to fight in Syria. So what do you think the potential outcome of that would be?
Well, Turkey, Erdogan, that government, they're a pretty dodgy bunch, right? But they are a NATO country, and they are committed to Assad's overthrow. But and they've been perfectly welcoming of the Syrian National Coalition and the Free Syrian Army. And Turkey is a totally different. Turkey has no reason to be afraid of Assad. But Jordan does. And we haven't talked anything about Lebanon. That's a whole other evening. But Lebanon has at least as many refugees as Jordan does. And Lebanon is as we all know, is kind of terribly fractured along ethnic and confessional lines. This actually might be a case where, it might not be such a bad thing for regional politics from a really cynical point of view, because the Syrians that are pouring into Lebanon tend not to be particularly affectionate with respect to Hezbollah. So maybe that's not a bad balance. I don't know that Turkey is... You see, it's the Saudi... If you want to look at the jihadist stuff, what the Saudis are trying to do, I think, is interesting. I don't think it's a good idea, but what they're trying to do now is they're setting up this thing called the Islamist Front or Islamic Front or something like that, in the hopes that they can kind of counter the Al-Qaeda types and the freebooters and the freelancers that are funded by oil money out of the Gulf states. It's a real paradox of our time, I tell you, when the Saudis have a more progressive policy in the region than the Americans do. That's pretty interesting. When the Saudis, of all people, can't stomach the idea of sitting on that rancid group known as the United Nations Security Council. They can't bear the idea, the Saudis, of all people, if the Saudis think that these people are rats, you know that it's pretty bad. So, yeah, it's a really peculiar time. I mean, the Saudis, they don't like the Muslim Brotherhood. They'd be perfectly happy to see a secular, more or less liberal democratic regime emerge in Syria. Weird.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What a great presentation. Well, we're going to go out for a break, and so you can speak to Terry outside and have a coffee and lots of time to chat. Thank you very much for your